at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive, and still broadcasting in high definition mono AM radio sound at AM 1570. We appreciate all of our WNST listeners out there, followers out there, and certainly I appreciate all the incredible feedback I've gotten on having my press credential rescinded by Chad Steele a couple of weeks ago. Tens of thousands of people have read the article now and have felt the impact. And I want to give a shout out to Paul Manna, my dear friend, for the Trifecta Food Festival. I spent the whole day out there Saturday. I did not get drunk. I just got a little tipsy, and then I mellowed out. And then it was a long, long day. And apologies to Seth for not making it to several species, but I did about 7 or 8 rock and roll bands. It was my Woodstock, Luke. And I got the Maryland Crab Cake Tour coming up this week. Thursday, we're going to be at the Beaumont from 1 until 4. I'm wearing my El Guapo shirt. I was wearing my State Fair shirt. I do not have a Beaumont shirt. Evan Brown needs to make that right. We need to figure that out. I'll do that on Thursday, probably along with a beautiful steak or something like that to go along with my crab cake from 1 to 4. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with Goodwill. Window Nation, of course, 86690Nation, taking great care of me as fall is here, and the Restaurant Association of Maryland, where I hope everybody ate their face off and got fat. I'm getting skinny. My wife's getting skinny. I don't know, man. Once you stop eating a crab cake every day and stop drinking a beer every day, and I haven't even had a taste for beer in the last couple of weeks, but the beer was cold after another Raven victory. These Buffalo people are coming in here. They're going to be jumping off tables. Luke, I know you saw the chick down in Maryland do the head kegger and the drinker because it's got 23 million views. How are you, man? 2-1, right? Level set. I mean, the sky's not falling. Lamar's still amongst the best players on earth. But what you and I do, even after a victory in New England, it's not good enough. Beating Bill Belichick, not good enough. We have to sit here and say, well, how are they going to beat the Bills? How are they going to beat the Bengals? And I guess first and foremost, health, and then this left tackle situation in the running game in general, right?
Yeah, no question about it. And one thing I would say is, okay, how are the Ravens going to beat the Bills? How are they going to beat the Bengals? The Bills and the Bengals right now are going to say, how are we going to stop Lamar Jackson the way he's playing right now? So let's just acknowledge that. But you mentioned the running game. And I think, we briefly touched on this in a previous conversation, but J.K. Dobbins making his 2022 season debut. Long, difficult rehab for him, as he recently confirmed. It wasn't just a torn ACL. It was a torn LCL. It was a torn meniscus. He tore the hamstring in his left leg. I mean, that was a bad injury that occurred 13 months ago, which is one reason why he wasn't out there week 1 or wasn't out there for the start of training camp, wasn't out there week 1, wasn't out there week 2, but did get out there in week 3 and was a solid start. I certainly think it's clear that he's not back to being the 2020 J.K. Dobbins yet, which shouldn't be shocking in the same way that 2002 Jamal Lewis did not look like 2000 Jamal Lewis, and certainly didn't look like the record-setting 2003 Jamal Lewis who rushed for 2,000 yards. So I think it's important to recognize that, and we know that at that position, it tends to be you're not fully back to that second year back. So in the case of J.K. Dobbins, he played 26 of 60 snaps. Did some nice things. You saw him active as a receiver out of the backfield, which was nice to see. A different little wrinkle there that we typically don't see from a Ravens offense. And
blocking becomes a whole lot more important when you're playing with your 4-string left tackle.
Sure, no question. Although that was a big part of what was on Patrick Ricard's plate on Sunday, and he did a great job there. But yeah, pass protection's a part of this. There's no question about that. When the Ravens decided to move on from Mark Ingram after 2021, Mark Ingram was really good in pass protection, so that's always going to be an element. But 7 carries, 23 yards, nothing special in that regard. 2 catches, 17 yards. It was a solid 2022 debut, knowing what he's been through the last 13 months to get back to that point, but certainly a work in progress. And this running game in general remains a work in progress. But I would say, beyond just talking about Lamar Jackson running for over 100 yards again, running for a touchdown, another long run, it was good for me to see Justice Hill do what he did, where we see him bust a 34-yard run. And he finished with 60 yards on 6 carries. That was nice to see. Even take away the 34-yard run, 26 yards on the 5 other carries. That's more in line with what you expect to see from a Ravens running game. So it wasn't perfect. It wasn't 2019 like, but certainly I think it was a step forward for this running game. One, just to get Dobbins back on the field, right? I mean, we know even if it's not right now, even if it's not next week, even if it's not next month, but we know of their current running backs, he's clearly the guy that has the upside. I mean, this was a guy that many people anticipated becoming a Pro Bowl caliber running back in year 2 before the ACL injury. So he's going to need time in that regard, but great to get him back out there, and just nice to see Justice Hill show some juice that, quite frankly, Kenyon Drake and Mike Davis had not shown over the first 2 weeks. We talk so much about the blocking, and certainly that's a huge part of it, right? At the same time, if you go back and, there are film junkies, people that are much more football savants than I am in terms of X's and O's and studying, they showed run plays over the first couple of weeks that at times were blocked reasonably well. And Drake and or Hill did not see, or sorry, Drake or Mike Davis, I should say, missed the hole. So it was nice to see Justice Hill do what he did. Certainly he warrants more carries moving forward. And I think we'll see a bigger workload for J.K. Dobbins as we get deeper into the season as well. But it was good to see. Clearly, 188 yards, 7.2 yards per carry. Lamar was most of that. And you still want to be in a position where you don't have to lean too heavily on Lamar, while acknowledging I don't want it to be a case where he doesn't run. Why would you take that away? But you want to find that balance there. And I think they did take a step when you look at Hill and Dobbins, 13 carries, 83 yards between the two of them. That was nice to see. It was nice to see someone other than Lamar Jackson have some success running the football. And we'll see what that looks like now moving forward, going up against Buffalo, which we know, their underwhelming point total aside in Miami, team that certainly can put up big points. So if you're the Ravens, you're going to have to score. Let's be clear about that. But at the same time, you want to be balanced. You want to be able to control the clock. So even if you do have a lead going into the fourth quarter, you don't want a repeat of what happened against Miami. And being able to run the football goes a long way in preventing that from happening.
You mentioned Brandon Copeland, and you mentioned, we've even made light, I don't know if it's light at all, about Brandon Williams or who would, guys they would reach to. And this isn't unusual, right? I mean, hell, Eric Weddle was winning Super Bowls last year getting reached to, right? So let's not PP on that, right? So, Tom Brady's still out running around playing at 45. So it is possible. Every year somebody's reaching for somebody, and there's a guy that says, I'm a week 8 player, I'm 32, I'm 34. Chad Brown's been on the show with us talking about being that guy for a couple of years as well. This left tackle thing, I don't know, the Ronnie Stanley thing, and I know we talked about that. We talked 30 minutes about that earlier today. Mm-hmm. But if that's not an answer, what is the answer? Because were they really going to play with Patrick McCary for 6 weeks, 8 weeks? Did they really think they're going to win playoff? I wonder all this out loud, because I'm starting to think when you're out there playing fourth string with a right tackle, you really don't have a handle on this. You're not where you need to be.
Yeah. The reality is, Nestor, there aren't 32 quality left tackles in the NFL. It's one of those positions that we talk about like quarterback, right? There are 32 de facto starters, by default, because every team has to have a starter, but where is the quality? And that's where, it's really easy to say, yeah, you need depth at left tackle. Well, sure, you want depth at every position, but one, there isn't enough supply. Two, you don't have enough cap space to have deep depth at every single position. So, their plan was Jawan James early in the season, and then hoping Ronnie Stanley be back by, whether it's week 4, week 5, week 6, whatever it is. And then the thought was, okay, your next man up would be Patrick McCary, who has the ability to play left tackle and, held up okay there, when he's been out there, since James went down in the Jets game in the opener. So, you get down to your fourth option. I don't really know what the solution is other than Daniel Faalele has a full week to practice. You certainly are going to use more Max Protect. You're certainly going to have, whether it's Patrick Ricard or Nick Boyle, who played very sparingly on Sunday in his season debut, over on that side, helping him out. But there are no great options. Jonathan Ogden's a 25-year-old Jonathan Ogden's not walking through that door right now. So really, it is a case of
Well, maybe
assuming
where's the
McCarry's going to miss
31-year-old
at least a
version of
little bit of
Brian
time.
McKinney?
Yeah, right, exactly. So, at this point, you have Faalele, you do have David Sharp on the practice squad. He's played a little bit, but I think probably more of a right tackle option there. Again, I do think that it's worth mentioning Morgan Moses has switched from the right side to the left side in the past. However, if they didn't do that Sunday, I'm not sure you're going to see them do that with time to think about it. To me, if they were that concerned that Faalele couldn't play left tackle, no questions asked, he couldn't do it, they would have shifted Moses over to the left side because he's a vet, right? I mean, he's done it before. It's not ideal, but when you're on your fourth left tackle in week 3, nothing's ideal about that. So it feels like Faalele will be that guy for right now. And you hope either McCarry can make a quick recovery, or, and this is the much more pertinent big picture question that you and I talked about in a previous conversation, that Ronnie Stanley perhaps gets back this week. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think really it's a non-starter until, as much as we kind of joke about the injury report, I do think this is a case of until you see him logging full practices on consecutive days, I'm not sure it's even something that, if he's limited again all week, I don't think he's playing Sunday. I think it's a case where you're talking about a guy who hasn't played in over a year in live game action and just started practicing the last 3 weeks. It's going to have to log at least a few full practices before we start talking about that. So in that way, we will have our curiosity satisfied one way or the other, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, when they're out on the field and we get that injury report as far as the practice participation. But where it stands right now, I think you're encouraged by the fact that Faalele did settle in and do a better job as the game went on, which, hey, I mean, that's a tough spot for a developmental right tackle, a rookie, to be in. Let's praise him for that. I'm not saying, I'm not damning him with slight praise there. I'm complimenting him with the way he was able to hold his ground after a rocky start. But yeah, you want Ronnie Stanley back. Certainly you want Patrick McCarry back, and Harbaugh said he'll be fine. But again, does fine mean he's out 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? We just know it's not a season-ending long-term kind of thing. So, it's not ideal when you're talking about getting ready to play Buffalo and Cincinnati, and we focus so much on the quarterbacks and their offenses, but we know they got some formidable pass rushers you're talking about there. So,
and Cincinnati's going to be rested too because they're playing early this week. I mean,
right.
Just going around the league, right? And what's happened in the league, and the Thursday night game where the Steelers didn't look like much, and we know the Browns probably aren't much, although they have a better roster wherever they be with Jacoby Brissett. But seeing how the Dolphins are suddenly the rage, and the Bills were, they won the Super Bowl last Monday and they lost it again. It's like an intercontinental title belt. It's just that they just keep passing it around, right? This who's the power ranking and all of that. But the Ravens have this, as Coach Billick would say here, sitting right in front of them, right? The Bills are coming in, the Bengals. This is where you make hay if you're going to be a 4-1 team. And before they threw me out of my seats, we would always say, I want to sit in those seats in an AFC championship game, right? Like that's one thing that hasn't happened here over 26 years. We talk about the Orioles maybe playing a playoff game, maybe hosting a World Series game, which hasn't happened since 1983. We haven't had one of those big games here, right? And this is where you put your big boy pants on and you say, we want to be a 1 seed. We think we're the best team. We have the MVP, despite not having a left tackle and a running game and linebackers and, blah, 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 and injuries and like all of that. And the best kicker and the return, we have all of these assets, Mark Andrews, whatever. But you talk about the deficiencies. All these other teams have deficiencies too, including the Bills who lost. And so they're coming in and they think they're good. This is kind of a heavyweight battle in week 4, right? I mean, and as you go around the league, I don't know how many heavyweight battles there are. I mean, I see the Giants and the Cowboys getting together, and I see these. Last week, the heavyweight was the Dolphins and the Bills was a heavyweight game all of a sudden. The afternoon game, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, that's a heavyweight game. Nobody could score. So like it's interesting week to week how this thing does change, but the perception is Bills and Ravens, these are playoff teams, right? That's a perception.
No question. And one of the biggest surprises when the schedule came out, what was it, back in May, whenever it was, right around the draft, right after the draft, whatever it was, one of my biggest initial reactions was Ravens and Bills isn't in prime time. I mean, a 1 o'clock game, really? I would have thought that that's at least the 425 national TV game because of what you just mentioned. I mean, two of the best quarterbacks in football, in Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and guys who do some things in a very similar way. I mean, as much as you and I have debate and talk and fight and argue and uh, talk about Lamar Jackson running, Josh Allen does the same things. Josh Allen's running around like a maniac and running into linebackers. So it really is fascinating in that way. So you said it though. There's one bye, right? They're home field advantage to the number 1 seed, and everyone else is playing wild card weekend now. So this is one of those games. And next week, in the same way that anyone runs into Kansas City, we talked about Ravens Chiefs in the last few years, how important those head-to-head games tend to be. One, because it's tiebreaker ramifications, but also just a case of you get a win, you hand them a loss. I mean, that goes a long way in determining who has the best record when it's all said and done after 17 weeks. But it is crazy. You mentioned some of the results, and you go around the league and teams that, I just mentioned Kansas City. Indianapolis looked terrible the first couple weeks. Look what happens in week 3. I mean, absolutely crazy.
The Jaguars have gotten up and started to crawl, right?
I'm
wearing guapo green right now. Your brother-in-law must be losing his lunch with the Eagles, right? Right now.
No question. I mean, you mentioned the Jaguars, and again, it's 3 weeks. Totally understand that. They've done a little more than crawl. I mean, they beat the pants off the Chargers on Sunday, and I get it. Herbert wasn't 100%, but 38-10. I mean, this isn't college football. 38-10 in the NFL, is you take notice of that. So, Trevor Lawrence is looking like the number 1 overall pick after, what was a very uneven season for him with a disaster of a head coach. I mean, Doug Peterson goes there, and suddenly the Ravens' November trip to Jacksonville looks a little different at 3 weeks into the season than you would have said. Now, Jacksonville could lose their next 6 games in a row, and we're not talking about them again. But for right now, that looks more impressive than you would have thought. Denver, okay, they beat San Francisco 11-10 on Sunday night. Just an awful Sunday night game. I mean, that felt like Thursday night football, did it not? It's just terrible. But the Broncos, everyone's thinking, oh, Russell Wilson, he's out of Seattle, and they haven't. I mean, Hackett had to bring in Jerry Rossberg just because he doesn't know how to manage a clock or make in-game decisions or anything. So all these things that we think we know, even about the best teams or even about the worst teams, 3 weeks in, you have some surprises, and that's what makes it fun, right? I mean, every year you look at the playoff field, there's at least 3 or 4 new teams in the playoff field, and we think we know this team's great or that team's terrible, and there are always some surprises, and it's not always just like the Ravens last year, who had a complete unprecedented collection of injuries that contributed to that led to their downfall. You just have players who get better, players who regress. I mean, it's fun. It's a week-to-week league, and as much as you try to do this, well, if team A beats team B, and well, team B lost to team C the previous week, and then they're playing this team, and that means that never works out, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Well, the storylines are cool because, I was watching Hackett, and then I saw Rossberg. I'm like, "What's up, Jerry?" And I don't ever think I sat down and ever had like a conversation with Jerry Rossberg, because in the modern era, I'm just not allowed to know them. Obviously, they threw me out of the building. So then I see Paul Hackett, and I'm like, "Oh, why didn't he get his dad to do this job?" I'm thinking to myself, his dad's 75, right? And I'm thinking, I think Paul Hackett hired Marvin in Pittsburgh in like 1990, or I think he was on that staff, and he was. So now I'm Googling things, and I'm going into the internet rabbit hole while I'm tweeting out. And, we love the league. There's an early morning game next week, trying to figure out where the hell Amazon Prime is. And then you get like this kid with the Lions who becomes an emerging wide receiver. You find new stars every year. I mean, the Philadelphia story and this quarterback that they have now is interesting there. And then all the basic jurisprudence that every time I see Bob Kraft, all I can think about is the massage parlor in Florida, and just various things that happen through this. but it's fun. We're into this. You're going to have a playoff baseball coming up this week. I know you and I will talk a little bit of Orioles Requiem and all that stuff as well. Although great pitching efforts against the Astros over the weekend as well, and kind of doing all that they've needed to do to hang in, to get to the last week, to leave us looking through the cage in the window at the, the Yankees playing playoff baseball again. But Luke can be found at Baltimore Luke. We're going to be hanging out all week here, talking football, talking things, doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. We're going to be in Catonsville at the Beaumont on Thursday from 1 until 4. Stop by, say hello. Get that incredible burger. I mean, one of the best burgers in town over there at lunchtime. I'm looking forward. I don't have lunch often. I went with Coach Gene Ubriaco from the Baltimore Skipjacks about 2 months ago, but I'm more of a dinner steak guy, and my wife's much more of a get the pork chop there with that mustard thing going on over at the Beaumont. We'll be there 1 to 4. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. I will be giving away Raven scratch-off tickets in the 21228 at Beaumont and Frederick on Thursday. Also talking up our friends at Window Nation, our friends at Goodwill Industries. We talked about recycling plastics last week with Lisa Raciniak, as well as the Restaurant Association of Maryland. I'm going to get Marshall Weston out to talk about all things and the success of how it works when you get out and eat and take care of these local businesses that we talk about so much. We were at Cooper's North on Friday, had beautiful conversations. Caroline Evans, if you know her from Realty and Sotheby's, she joined me. Terry Beck, the manager at Cooper's North, had an unbelievable bowl of gumbo. Luke, I made a star out of Chris Pica's wife. Kate Pica joined us on the program. She was on the Maryland Crab Cake Tour at Cooper's promoting Dog Fest. That's October 15th. We're going to celebrate 5 years with our beautiful, beautiful kitty Nala. And it is Gotcha Day with her right around my birthday 2 weeks from now. So we're going to be out at Dog Fest. We encourage everyone to come out to Dogfest, dogfest.org. On the 22nd of October, I should have my own little calendar. We got the Pit Beef Festival. My dude Greg Nivens and the Beer Barbecue. Good folks. Eat, drink, relax, folks. Putting on this incredible event down at Port Covington. So I got Pit Beast happening for my birthday on the 22nd. We got Maryland Crab Cake Tours happening mainly on Fridays, but on Thursday this week. And of course, Luke has you covered for all things Ravens. They still let him in on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. He'll be at the game on Sunday as well. I'll be here monitoring all things. And for those of you who've wondered about the website crash and the whole Chad Steele thing and the reading of it and why the website looks different, we've got a new artist for the website, working real hard on that as we turn the corner and the leaves change and I start to wear my cardigans and wear 3 layers of clothing and sit in here and develop a new website. So you'll see a new, bigger, better Baltimore Positive emerge, as well as columnists, which is my new feature out there, and all of Luke's work now on the right-hand side of the fold of page 1. Now that we're getting organized around here. Baseball for you, Luke, anything you want to say, on the way out of this thing here to just sort of more than not to end the Orioles thing, but there's this whole point where these playoffs are going to begin, and this is a whole different kind of playoff format.
Oh, no question about that. And we'll get into that, but the Aaron Judge thing, the fact that he's a Yankee aside, and I get that, it's fun. I mean, when you're talking about Roger Maris and
Sammy
as much
Sosa.
as you think about thinking about the painful part of that, maybe not painful, but disdain that you have for that in hindsight, even though everyone knew what was going on at the time, kind of, sort of, right? I mean, everyone kind of looked the other way, or at least a lot of people did, including Bud Selig and company. But that's been fun. Really cool to see Albert Pujols, 700 home runs. I mean, what a finish to his career. No one would have thought this was going to happen a year or two ago. I mean, he just looked completely done. And
you also talk about a guy that when he was 18, 19, or 20, he wasn't the prettiest girl at the prom.
Well, I mean, but he when he was a rookie, though,
No.
Amazing.
I'm talking about the difference between Adley Rutschman and him.
Oh, no question. I'm
just talking about on the Mike Piazza going to the Hall of Fame when you're a 21st round draft pick or whatever. It's a different gig. It just is. It's different being Tom Brady when you got picked in the 6th round and you're full of piss and vinegar the rest of your life because of it. I know, because I'm one of those guys.
No question about it. So that's been fun. And you alluded to this, Orioles. I mean, tough series with Houston. I mean, a split over 4 games. They came that close to having a chance to sweep that series. No, they didn't do it. And ultimately, it's why they're, barring a miracle, going to fall short. But great pitching. It was really impressive to see what they did with Lyles complete game, Bradish 8 2/3, Dean Kramer complete game shutout. I mean, And those last 2 games came against the Astros. So
If you
good
want
to
an
see them.
exclamation point for the season, you got
Good
it,
to see
right? No
that.
matter what
Sure.
happens this week, right?
No question. And I mean, there's a lot to be excited about. A lot of uncertainty as far as ownership, unfortunately, and what that means for their offseason. But in terms of the players on the field and the players that are coming up at Norfolk and guys that are going to be here next year, it's a lot to be excited about right now. So, yeah, disappointing because they did have a chance here in September. But hey, the fact that we're going to be talking about a team that finishes with a winning record and is still mathematically in it going into the final week to 10 days of the season, no one. I thought I was being too optimistic when I said I thought they'd avoid losing 100 losses. I picked them to lose 97, and I thought I was being too optimistic back in April, but that just speaks to how far they've come and where they could potentially be going in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having that conversation with you based on
yeah.
where our heads were in March and April and what the expectations were and how we thought John Means was going to have 32. I mean, just names we've just forgotten about, right? And then there's the Trey Mancini, how that really played out and how it may play out that he gets a ring 6 weeks from now, right? So like all of that's possible as well. Baseball, football, sports, even the Turtles giving the Wolverines hell over the weekend, and a nice little speech from Mike Loxley after that. If you haven't caught that, make sure you're catching that. But we get the Crab Cake Tour out this week. We'll be at the Beaumont. I'm moving around the Beltway. I'm not going anywhere. I'm in for the long haul and writing at Columnist and doing all of our work. He's Luke. I'm Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570. Towson, Baltimore, having those wise conversations at baltimorepositive.com.